So I want to welcome everyone here to First Unitarian Church of Honolulu's Tuesday night Pau Hana. It's a time for us to gather and learn more about life around us, the friends with whom we share this earth and this life. And we couldn't be happier today to have one of our best friends of our congregation with us, Lutricia Callair, who had the great fortune, or we have the great fortune, that she's in our time zone right now and able to be with us. And Lutricia has been one of our trainers in the Jubilee anti-racism training work, but also is starting her own project, has started her own project for quite some time and been in touch with some of the members here and in many other places around the country. And we want to hear about that work also. So Lutricia, welcome. And it's really wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you, TJ.
Yeah. So are you enjoying your trip to Hawaii so far?
I always enjoy my trip to Hawaii, always.
Good, good. I'm glad. Is it as beautiful as you remember it every time you come back, or more beautiful?
Now I think this time is more beautiful just because of the pandemic. And there was a period of time where I couldn't get here because of that. And so I'm just so happy to be here, and it is just absolutely beautiful and gorgeous. And it's hard to compare it, but I feel really good this time and just blessed that I'm healthy, that the people, my family here, as best I can tell, people are healthy, and I am meeting folks and reconnecting, and that feels real good to me. So yeah.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I just want to kind of jump right in and ask a little bit about your project that you're working on and that you had a meeting about here. Can you tell us some about this new project you're working on?
Yeah, and I want to start by saying that, for me, I feel like my life work has been to answer maybe one question, and that question is, how can we come together and build relationships that interrupt the kinds of barriers that have been created that separates us? And that in those separations, we've just created a lot of trouble for ourselves. We're afraid of each other. We don't trust each other. So things that we should be doing as a community and a society, we are not able to do together. And I think this pandemic is a classic example of that. The fact that we are fighting and fussing about whether or not we need to wear a mask or whether or not we need to be vaccinated, that in that conversation, there is little consideration about how our choices affect those around us. And that there seems to be even limited care about the suffering that it causes. It's not like, I don't wear a mask and I don't get vaccinated. And, oh, well, if I don't wear a mask or if I don't get vaccinated, that has consequences for the people around me. And the fact that we now have, I think, well over 700,000 people dead, and we're still having this conversation is deeply disappointing to me. And what if I could create the world I want, it would be an awareness of our deep connection to one another, the sense that we all belong to the earth, that we are kin, and that in that kinship, we sustain and support each other. And, my vision is that that's a safer world, that's a healthier world, that is a more prosperous world, that is a loving environment. And so that's what my work is about, is trying to, at least in the spaces that I occupy, and the places where I have influence, is to create those opportunities for kinship. And so part of that is the work I do with Jubilee, which you all know about. But the other part of it is the work I do in creating kinship circles, in creating here and now conversations, And also in my website, Everybody as Our Own, which we gather with people once a month to have really compelling, I think, compelling conversations about what brings us together and what separates us, and to identify those issues and to begin to talk deeply about them in a space that I call a caring community, where people can bring whatever questions, concerns, issues they have to share with others. And so that in a nutshell is the work that I'm doing. So
what led you to first, that's beautiful. But my curiosity is running ahead of my my words. Uh, was there a moment or turning point or something that moved you or called you to just say, this is the kind of work that you want to do, or this is the kind of response you want to have to this world that we see? Was there something that led to it, a defining moment, or was it a growth experience?
actually, the thing that I go back to, TJ, is uh, remembering as a child the death of Emmett Till. And that, as a child, my childish mind, my simple way of thinking about it was that he was killed because people hated him. And because he was the same color as me, I went to, therefore, white people hate people that look like me. And I think at that point, I wanted to figure out, in my simple childlike way, how do we get white people to like Black people? I mean, just simple. How do we get white people to like Black people? But then that led me to the civil rights movement when I was like 13. I think the first thing I did, which was not a formal civil rights movement action, happened when I was 13. But then growing up in the civil rights movement, I just learned so much. For instance, Dr. King would say, which was really useful and helpful and has guided my life, Dr. King would say, we must be able to see the light in everyone, even those who would oppose us, and which got us to the nonviolent civil disobedience or nonviolent social justice. It was built on the principle: we will not condone an unjust law, but we won't fight about it either. The nonviolent civil disobedience is, we're not going to support this, but we're not going to fight about it. So we're going to enter into always opportunities for peacemaking. That's his notion of the beloved community. And I mean, that the beloved community fits with the first principle, which addresses the inherent worth and dignity of everyone, and it fits with the eighth principle, which brings people to accountability around race. So that, learning that at the age that I did, guided my work going forward. It's why I became a counselor. It's why I started doing clinical therapy. It's how I became a community builder. So my work has been guided by that. And I think part of my commitment to him and to the movement and to the people that nurtured me and trained me and helped me is to honor that idea of the beloved community, and to do whatever I know how to do to bring that into being.
Yeah, we thank you for that. We spoke some and learned some of us did, about the beloved community in a 3-part Pau Hana class that I foisted upon our congregation about the history of the beloved community. So you have folks here who know a lot more about its history than some other folks. So thanks for that. And also that idea of coming from a very young age, you know, to this work, and finding that there, and honestly is important. And you mentioned being a counselor, you mentioned some other work that you've done. Do you see all that as growing into this work that you're doing now, or like a movement that you're moving to now, or is it all still feeding each other? Does this kind of work of kinship, is it helpful in your practice settings? Is it helpful in your clinical settings? And are they feeding each other? Are you learning? Is that how it's kind of working now and
Yeah,
cohesion?
I do think they feed into each other. I mean, you know, as a therapist, you know, that notion of recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of all people really is helpful, because most time people come into my practice and they've separated themselves. They don't recognize that in themselves. And so much of my work is to get them back to that. And so whatever techniques I use or interventions I might offer, or I use to help the person remember who they really are. And I try to reflect in my interactions with them that I see that inherent worth and dignity in them. And that, in fact, they have all the wisdom and skills and resources they need within themselves to come to the person that they want to be. Now, of course, if there's some sort of serious mental illness that's guided by the way your brain works, like schizophrenia or something like bipolar disorder, then that does require another kind of intervention. But for the most part, if I can help people remember who they are and get in touch with that inherent worthiness in themselves, they will figure a way out of their difficulty with my guidance, but they will figure that out. So I think all of my work sort of is based in that, and particularly in the community building.
Pizza.
Sorry, I'm not sure whose computer's on, but one of the things that comes up when you talk about working with people and trying to find their inherent worth and dignity is, if I may ask this question, do you work with people who you evaluate as suffering, who the root, or maybe almost all their suffering, is coming from racial effects on them? I mean,
that
physiological,
that I intentionally organize my practice around those communities. My practice exists in marginalized communities. I happen to think that I'm a pretty good therapist, and I felt like those communities deserved just the best that I could offer them. And I also, I mean, because really those are the communities that I come from. I grew up in those communities, and I know the level of despair and the depression and pain that can come from feeling like you are not a part of the human family, like you've sort of been kicked to the curb, so to speak. And having people find their way back to their own dignity is what my work is about in those communities. But the other thing is to sort of explain to those communities that this isn't all you. You know, that there are some systemic forces out here working against you that you need to understand. So a lot of it is my sort of inviting those communities to address in whatever way they see fit those systemic forces that are working against them. Like, for instance, one of the things that I do actually has been kind of a gift to me is something I call family activism. And so for example, a single mom may come in and be talking about the fact that, you know, they're putting a landfill in their, 2 blocks down from where her children are playing. And that she feels so overwhelmed by that, and she doesn't know what to do about it. And literally what I say to her is, you and your children should show up at the next city council meeting. Now that is really, and for the children, one, to see their mom acting consciously for herself and for them, to model that, to not just take it, not just say, oh, the system can't catch a break, nothing I can do, but to see that mom find the courage to go out and lend her voice to the community, to the city council meeting, to say, this is what this landfill is doing to my children. And to see the children witnessing their mom doing that, it's marvelous. And actually the children, because we talk about, well, okay, what can you do, kids?
Yeah.
Mom's got to go do this. So now what can you do to help mom that's got to do this? So we're really planning this thing, strategizing out what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, who wants to go, who doesn't want to go. Is there something they need to do at the house to make sure the house is together so that mom doesn't have to worry about that and she can go to this meeting? So, and it's been amazingly therapeutic to sort of have families that do that together. And I think that's fun for me to watch that, and to watch the pride in children's eyes, or they'll come back at the next session and everybody will be excited about, well, did you hear what mom said? And did you hear what he said? And did you, they just are just recounting that. So for me, it's like helping my clients understand that, yes, there are things that are happening to you, that that there's some real emotional stresses and that you're facing, but one, that is not just all you, and you have something to say about those systemic forces that are leading to the kind of difficulties you're facing. So
that brings up something that I think about a lot. It revolves around trauma, but I don't want to like go there fully. But we can, but I wrote recently that we may have traumas, but we don't need to stop doing things that fulfill us and
right.
that keep us well. And I said, I'm not saying those other things we do that enjoy are even going to fix the quote, fix the trauma. It's just that it's okay to let them sit side by side and work on these things separately and apart, and that there's a beauty to that and a harmony and sort of a healing that can happen. It's not a promise, but is that something you found or have seen?
Yeah, I think one of the things I say to my clients a lot is, it looks to you like you are out of control, that there are things that are happening in your life over which you have no control. And it is causing you a certain level of emotional, psychological, spiritual, even physical distress. Yes, but that does not mean you are helpless. So you have to find the place where you can get on your feet and do something. Because when people start saying, well, I'm out of, the system is too big and I can't do anything, and all I have to do is just take this and I'm going to go get high, or I'm going to whatever. I say, okay, yeah, there's some big things out there that you certainly can't in and of yourself control, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're helpless. So let's look at the ways in which you are not helpless. Mm-hmm. Let's look at the ways in which you're not helpless, and let's use those to create the life you want for yourself and your family.
So has this family modality that you're looking at, which is sort of familial, what we think of as family, is that part of what has led to the kinship way of thinking for you, or is there more to that? Is it deeper? Or they kind of feed with each other? I mean, is that success sort of what took you into trying to build these kinship circles and have that kind of support, or is there something more?
Yeah, I think the notion of kinship circles is the underlying notion is, in some way, we belong to each other. Okay. That we are accountable to each other. Mm-hmm. that there is a level of care that we owe, for lack of a better word, to each other as sharing this planet and being a part of the human family. And what I've learned in my practice, quite frankly, is the extent to which people can offer that care, that sort of that kinship to themselves, they can then extend that to others. So if I can't find my own source of deep connection and love and deep respect and care for myself, I don't care what my circumstance is, then I'm not going to be able to extend that so well to others. And so for me, the notion of kinship, which is remembering who we are to each other and extending that deep respect and care for each other, is key to the whole ball game. It's key to the work I do, the anti-racism work I do, to Everybody as Our Own, which is the website, to the kinship circles, and to the here and now conversations that I have too.
So one of the things that I've seen coming up, both in just emails I get or conversations I have, or is around language, is around, and I mean, it involves when someone says something on social media, the risk of being canceled, like sort of cancel culture, people losing jobs because of things they said 6, 7, 8 years ago. And in particular, I'm thinking of Kevin Hart, doing the thing he always dreamed he wanted to do because of a 5-year-old tweet or a joke, and pieces like this of the where our language is being so carefully scrutinized. And then also and I think that breeds fear to open one's mouth and to have the conversation. How are you seeing also that in society, and what's sort of your response when you're seeing these sort of, these language fires that are coming up?
Yeah, I think there's some comments that to me are egregious if they are intentional and upfront efforts to harm someone else. I think we have to deal with that. But TJ, I think we're all learning. We're trying to figure this thing out. No one has all the right answers to this. And I think the extent to which we can create those spaces where people can just screw up, say the dumb thing, ask the dumb question, and know that it can be heard and dealt with and moved through. I'm not saying we have to accept it or endorse it or acknowledge it, but the space where there's a possibility for learning to happen. Like, what was that comment about? What does it generate in you? What does it generate in others? How does it feel to others to have to be referred to in this way? And those are the conversations that we need to have in the most respectful, caring environment that we can have them. Because I don't know, TJ, any way we get through all of these things that have managed to separate us, the color of our skin, who we choose to love, our gender, our social status. We have to create spaces where we can have those really difficult, tough conversations and know at the end of the day, we come out loving each other and caring about each other. And we don't necessarily have to cancel each other because we make this statement that somehow or other offends another person. And so I'm kind of pushing for that side of it,
So I have some friends in other churches that they sort of take a view, and I think it's a well-intentioned view of, well, in the end, we're all here to blank, like this unifying thing. Like, in the end, we're all here to serve, in their cases, maybe to be a disciple of Jesus, or to be saved, or something like that. And so they sort of take hurtful things that are said and say, instead of dealing with them, say, it's all just a path toward this thing we're all trying to do together, this community, but don't really unpack the way you're saying. And
right.
So, and you have some experience in Unitarian Universalist circles. I'm curious, when we don't have a a solitary kind of thing where our unitary thing, oddly for Unitarians, we're not very, unitary, thing that we're doing that kind of lets us all move toward that and push other things a little bit aside. How have you seen it work in places where we're just kind of left with the stuff that we say to each other, or the things that are said? Is it working in church spaces? Have you seen it working, I guess, is my question.
Well, I don't think our conversations as Unitarians are deep enough. I think we scrape the surface. We're kind of allergic to, feeling bad, and we're kind of allergic to that. And so our conversations tend to be these sort of shallow, euphemistic ways of speaking, but they don't go, and the stuff that's really in us that needs to be said and lifted up and are really possibilities for learning for all of us don't get said. There is information in almost every comment we make to each other. It tells us something about ourselves. It tells us something about each other. And the issue is, how do we handle it? It, to me, the issue is never what is said. The issue is how we cope with what is said. And can we maintain or keep our commitment to continue to care and love each other through these difficult conversations? But we have to have the difficult conversations. We can't just glance over it and act like, well, that guy said, let's just keep going. I think about Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote The Tipping Point, and he said the way change happens is that when a critical mass of people feel so deeply committed to an issue that they're literally willing to risk themselves in order to make it real. And the risk is being vulnerable, looking bad, whatever. I am so committed to this that I'm willing to bring my whole self and put it on the table. Carol uses this term, throw it on the, I forget, I won't try to repeat what Carol says, but I think it is, you leave it all on the table. So can we put it all on the table? Can we deal with it and come out on the other end? Because the goal is to get through it, not to run away from it, not to bury it, but to get through it, to get beyond it. And can we do that? And I don't know, this is a family that I love, so I feel like I can say this. I don't think that we do that work nearly enough in our congregations. And even though we say that's what we want to do, I don't know that that is ultimately what we do. And, what I'm pushing for, even in the Jubilee training, I think we need to do more of that, is to have opportunities to have more of those conversations and to build the glue of relatedness and trust that makes those conversations happen and enables us to get beyond them and see each other differently or connect differently than we had on the other side of it. But I don't think we can run away from them. And I have certainly gotten in plenty of trouble by being a bit more outspoken about things than I think people would want me to, but yeah.
You bring that up, and thank you for that. I had the real honor to be present for the most recent offering of the Microaggression Workshop by this community. So I was at the very first one, and I observed it again recently, and it's become extremely fun, frankly.
Yeah.
And the facilitators are expert novice. They keep saying we're not experts. They're expert at saying they're not experts.
Yeah, but they are aces at this.
Aces, really, that's it. That's the word.
Aces at this. Right?
And the joy of watching people have to inhabit not even so blatantly, subtly racist tropes, and then being able to almost get that out, and how good people are at being racist in that. is kind of like joyful in a way. And then because then it gets to stop and it's all in a safe setting. And I'm not saying but I mean, I felt in those two sessions, in some ways, we got to deeper truths and heard things in the space that people are afraid to say. And even though it was in a theatrical sort of safe way, it's like the power of theater or the power of art, that they say things that you then have to talk about, but at least someone said it.
Yeah, we did our last community meeting, everybody has our own, and a lot of people from here were there. Nancy was there, Jim Cole, Carla, Carol, there were a number of people there. But we had this conversation with white men about how they are experiencing themselves in this new dynamic of sort of quote woke culture where racism is really being addressed. And so it came about when a very progressive, lovely man said, you know, I feel like I am being demonized. I feel like I'm being demonized just because I am white and male. And so I said, well, if you're willing, why don't you come on with us and let's have this conversation? So it was him, he's a medical doctor, wonderful guy, and two other white men, and my son, Earl, who had a really good conversation about what that feels like and what that's like for them. And I felt like it went deep, it was meaningful. As a matter of fact, we're going to do part 2 at our next community meeting because stuff got said that, you know, Nancy sort of highlighted, like, look, we've gotten to a place here and we know it's time to go, but can we unpack this a little bit more? But it was one of the most, it was a beautiful conversation, but it wasn't an easy one. You know, it wasn't, it was difficult, but it was just deeply respectful and caring, and people, I think, you know, got a lot out of it. And I want to keep having those kind of conversations. So what are the things that we are struggling with as we try to build this beloved community and this society that is not based on all of the isms? What do we need to do and understand to get us past that? And I actually think that understanding how good-hearted, loving white men are experiencing this is important to us. That it's not, we don't want to become the thing we hate. We don't want to say, well, you know what, you're this white guy, therefore we're going to cancel you, because the next day you're going to get canceled as the Black person. So we don't want to recreate that. So everybody as our own means just that, everybody as our own. And you come to our site and you get treated as if you are our own. And you bring your pain, your questions, your concerns there. But I just think it's really important that we do that for each other.
Yeah. I have a friend from Arizona whose sister married an Arizona Diamondback who's a man of color and has a lot of money and prestige and has then a lot of cousins of color, and it's a family, you know, that's blended and things like that. And he just has told me that, like, he can't even speak in public the way he speaks with his family, where they say everything and anything because of the mix of what it is. And he's here on an island that everyone keeps talking about as being so open, and he just kind of keeps his mouth shut because it's like, you're not open. Yeah, like, you're not even close to open. You have not, it's like, you have not heard Sunday dinner at my house. Like, the stuff that gets said, the people chasing each other around, like, and so it's that I sometimes have this image of his, I mean, his brother essentially growing up, was his cousin, was a Black, you know, gay Black man, you know, and it's just, and seeing like the way people react at, even on this island, he wishes for so much more for us. And it always makes me laugh, this image of his family. So
it's really curious, because I think one of the things I learned, I was studying Carl Whitaker, who's a family therapist. I'm trained in satir practice, but I was studying Carl Whitaker, and Dr. Whitaker said one of the ways he recognizes a healthy family is that they are not polite. That's his in, they're not polite. So, and I kind of that we kind of lose the politeness. We don't lose the care for each other. We don't lose the way we treat each other and the deep care for that. But we kind of lose the politeness in favor of some deep conversations that will help us know each other better.
It's tough. So as a minister, and I don't want to make this about me, but I'm gonna anyway. I have this rule of, no F words in the sanctuary. So I'm part of the problem, I mean, I have, I'm exuding a little bit of, I get it, but we gotta quote behave. I'm the behave police, and there's a part of me that knows darn well that what you're saying is true, that the impoliteness and the if I have my way, insurrectionist tendencies are healthy in church, are healthy, and but I also have it in my ear and my mind, like, how do we welcome new people, and the newcomer that walks through the door, if they don't know, my friend and his dog are about to come in the back door, just FYI. But this is Venus. But if I am like, if I'm okay with yelling at someone and having that conversation, but someone brand new has no idea how much I love them and that we're having this conversation, can you just take that scenario and maybe spin it for me in a way that it's going to work?
Yeah, I think you have to be careful about it. People, remember we said family, so there's something, we know each other. People walking through the door that don't know us and don't know, I would be careful about the language that I would use until I understood how I needed to be with them and how they needed to be with me in a way that built the kinship. Because we just walking through the door, we haven't built the kinship yet. So I would be I would want to know what connects me to them and what's the best way of communicating. Now, I believe that once we know each other and care about each other, that we can relax that a little bit. But at the beginning, I think I really would want to be careful about how I engaged them and connected with them, and until we knew each other better. So I think that's a good idea.
So it's a both and. It's a this is a space for this and a time for this. But maybe, like, if I was giving myself advice, or if you were giving me advice, to be a little more intentional about times when family, when kin are together, when we can open it up and speak a little more freely.
Yes,
like
exactly.
in a setting.
Yeah, I think there's a certain kind of balance and a certain kind of balance that you're walking and trying to figure out when it's appropriate to use certain kinds of language and address people. Because you do have to be careful about, I think, people that who don't know us and whom we don't know as well, and noticing their sensibilities.
I mean, anyone who's been on a late night board meeting with me knows that the language rules kind of wobble a little bit after about 8 o'clock at night. Allison's laughing. To catch myself a little bit.
Carol told me something about that too, about you. So yeah.
If you get me in the right mood. This whole, I think it's actually exactly what you're seeing now. You're in my home, my friend's dog is here. I'm on the phone, I'm talking to people, and sometimes it just, comes out. I was a lawyer after all. We had a different language. So what's the we do have kind of a question here, which actually I think is a good time to ask. Someone brought up this question of, and when we're getting into language, it's one of the things we're seeing now in this election cycle is making critical race theory. I'd call it a canard, something that is like not even real, that people don't even, most people who are against it don't know what it is. And so I do have a question from someone asking, what do you think of the term? And was it a semantic blunder, maybe, to call it a theory and not a fact? Or I don't know, how are you seeing this idea play out?
I'm not clear who's using the term. I've heard it from the far right,
Right.
Critical race theory, because quite frankly, I'm not sure what it is that they're talking about and calling critical race theory.
Right.
Because it sounds to me like anything that helps us understand racism and how it's played itself out in our society, they're calling critical race theory.
Yeah.
But I don't know what that term really means in a real sense, except as a way to negatively name the work we're trying to do. So if you're trying to say, we need to understand our history, like the multi-generational timeline that we use in our workshop, I guess they would call that critical race theory. Well, I don't think of that as critical race theory. I just think of that as history. Those are facts. Theories are kind of things that have to be proven. I mean, I think we're talking about this has happened,
That's my understanding is essentially it is in the legal world, it's the precept that though something on its face does not appear to be racist, if after 5 to 10 years, like in New Jersey, they revoked the discretion on the part of officers to stop motorists because the numbers did not lie. The proportion of the number of motorists stopped was so by far people of color that the application of what seemed on its face not to be racist was clearly racist in the application. And my understanding of it is that critical race theory is that process by looking at the results of something and saying, and it's literally maybe the most groundbreaking book of the last 20 years, Michelle Alexander's work on ending the new Jim Crow. That is, award-winning work in the field of critical race theory, but I think you're right that it got taken by the right and co-opted and being lobbed as an epithet to something that had no politics. It was simply numbers.
Right. But see, I'm just curious because I've never heard, and maybe you've heard something from Dr. Alexander that I haven't, which is I've never heard her call it critical race theory.
No.
I've never heard Isabel Wilkerson call CAS critical race theory.
No.
So I'm just, so I'm kind of guided by that. I mean, they're not calling it critical race theory, although what you say makes sense, that they did an analysis and said, we've looked at these data and the data is telling us this, and based on this, we're going to make this decision. But that to me is kind of not like theory. That's kind of like we've seen the facts here, and these are what the facts are telling us. So I'm not clear. I have to sort of develop my thinking around what critical race theory is, because
but we're having offers to do explanations, and we only got 15 minutes left, and thank you for the offer, but I think we're going to move into other areas. We can do our own learning on that. So my question really then is, you're in this phase now, and I read in your sometimes I do a little research for these, but I read one of the things in your bio is that you thought as a child that in your lifetime you'd see the end of racism and racist outcomes in our society, and that you still hold that hope for that to happen in your life. Can you tell us something about your dream of, is there a next phase? Is there a movement beyond or where what you're doing now moves into a wider movement that you see, or how do you see that happening in your dreams?
I think now my hope and wish as I've gotten older and wiser and smarter and know things don't happen instantly, that if we can create communities in which we are able to deeply care about each other, so that we can accept each other warts and all, that if we can do enough of that, we have the greatest possibility of interrupting these kind of isms that we're dealing with. That I genuinely believe that if you know my heart and you know me as a human being, it's going to be really difficult for you to come at me with some notion of who you think a Black woman is, or who you think the next Black woman is. That is about as good as it gets for us. That if we build these relationships among ourselves that actually challenge these arbitrary labels that have been laid on us, because now we know, I use the term, I want to see your story in me, and I want you to see my story in you. If we can do that, with each other, then I think that's our best hope for interrupting this stuff. Now, how, if you think about Gladwell and critical mass, and he says that 20% of people that really internalize it and believe it and are really willing to put themselves out there, change can happen. I'm kind of holding out for that. But at this point, my work in my time on this planet, whatever time I have left, is to attend to doing that, creating as many possibilities as I can for us to be that for each other, to care that deeply, to be that available, to be willing to put ourselves out for each other, to be willing to understand the other story as well as I understand my own.
Sorry, someone's at my door. I'm not sure why. Hang on.
Sorry.
Hey. Sorry, someone's selling butter mochi.
Okay.
And they scared my friend's dog. I had a chance to practice there, but I also can't eat butter mochi. So anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt. And so you were
That's
saying,
okay. Yeah, I grew up in a community. I mean, I talked to Carla about this a lot, where the Black women I grew up around literally did not meet strangers. I mean, it was just amazing. If you showed up in our community, and my community was the Jim Crow South. I grew up in a impoverished, low-income, segregated community. But if you showed up in our community and you were hungry, or you needed something, we would figure out, the women that raised me would figure out a way to get it to you. And it really didn't, the thing that was pretty impressive about that, as I think back on it now, that race was not an issue.
right.
What was an issue was that you were a human being in need, and they had something they could give you. They had something that could help you. And so that's what I'm trying to recreate that community that I grew up in, because it was the safest, even absent money, it was the safest, secure community I have ever grown up in, seen.
Now, I don't want to get too down the road on analyses here, but I've heard people say that people who witnessed the strength of that community feared it, who did not want those communities to be strong, worked to break them.
Yes.
Because they knew another generation of children raised by those mothers,
Yeah,
we're done. That whatever powered play we were making, it's over. You get a whole generation raised on that kind of love, that's it. It's critical mass could develop.
That's right. White supremacy cannot thrive in that community. Oppression cannot exist in that arrangement. And that's what the white supremacists and people that tend toward oppression know. And so they are really afraid of it. They're afraid of those communities. And they do try to break them. And they try to break them by shaming them. Carla, I was saying to Carla that one of the things that I'm really studying and trying to understand in my own life is where shame exists. And one of the ways that they tried to break us was to shame us. We don't have daddies in the house. We're lazy. Men don't work. The jobs we have, just whatever, to shame us. And to the extent that we internalize that, It was to our own detriment. I think my biggest gift growing up was that I grew up in a segregated community of lovers. I grew up around lovers, and it was segregated. It didn't have any money, but we loved each other. And we took care of children. We took care of the elderly. That was what we did. And I think that's been my biggest gift. And so, yeah. And if you think about, I mean, I've said in my anti-racism training, we tend to see those marginalized communities as problem communities, but there is such resilience and competence and grace and love in those communities. Those communities can teach us a lot about who we are and the kind of people we can be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's obviously there's fictionalized stories of communities like that, but I'm also, I'm thinking of Bryan Stevenson's Just Mercy, and I know the movie does justice, but the way he writes about traveling to the people of the men he was helping and the experience of driving to the roads, the way they speak, the way I almost think of it. I mean, that movie was kind of intentionally a debunking of the Atticus Finch myth,
Right.
and in favor of the real, like, bonded truth of those communities.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't know how much I can do that today, but when I was in undergraduate school and I took a job I went to work at one summer in Connecticut because I was trying to earn money to go to school. My dad had just died. So I was in Connecticut. I mean, and I was in New Milford, Connecticut, where there was just like, maybe I'm the only Black person there. So I would used to go over to New Haven on the weekends. And I remember I went over to New Haven and I was just lonely, TJ. I mean, it's just like, I'm just there by myself, and I'm all of 18 years old.
Oh.
So I go to New Haven and I see this Black person, and I said, just like this, "Where is the Black community?" And he knew where it was. He said, "Go down to Dixwell Avenue." So I made my way over to Dixwell Avenue, and I find this little cafe, and I go in, and there's this beautiful woman, and I'm a kid, and she sees that, and she comes over. I think I probably brought out the mom in her, and so she starts talking to me. And the first thing she says, which is what we say in the Black community: "Who are your people?" Who are your people? Now she's in New Haven. I'm from Spartanburg, South Carolina. She starts talking about who are your people. She asked me my mom's name, and she asked me my mom's maiden's name. And she said, "Your mom's maiden name is Dennis?" I went, "Yes, ma'am. My mom's maiden name is Dennis." She said, "Well, we got some Dennises in our family. Well, where do you live?" I live in Spartanburg. "Oh, you live in Spartanburg?" And TJ, inside of 10 minutes, we were cousins.
Yeah.
We were cousins.
Yeah.
And she was feeding me and, not requiring any payment. Just come on back anytime you want to. That's the connection. That's the relatedness. And I think I yearned for that. I missed that as I grew up and moved away from that community and moved more into society and professional living and all of that. I lost that. And I think my children lost that. And I kind of regret that part of it. I don't think I gave to them what that community gave to me. But that community didn't exist really for them like it did for me.
Yeah. I also wrote about an age when air travel and jobs and a lot of things became really easy and really important, that took us far away from the places that we kind of grew up. And there's something to that. I feel like the generation coming up is really interested in roots and being in a place and rootedness.
Yeah, I think they're hungry for it. I think they really miss it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a hope for me. And yeah, I mean, I think about my parents' generations, and I hear like my father and his friends talking about growing up in Yonkers, and my mom in Brooklyn, and and the stories, and like, just being in the same place over and over. And I don't have any of that. I was in soccer and I was flying around here, and it's different. So
Yeah. Yeah, like being able to just be able to be outside after dark and know it's okay.
yeah,
And that you're not going to get hurt, and that there's somebody always watching out for you as a youngster. And so I hope we can get back to some of that as we, as we evolve as a society, particularly. I think that's our greatest hope in my mind for interrupting all the things that have tended to separate us and have made us afraid of each other and hate each other and mistrust each other.
yeah.
I kind of hope this I had hoped that this pandemic would teach us something about that. I am less certain about it now since it's evolved into the kind of conversations that we're having. But I was thinking, wow, now we all know how connected we are and how one thing can affect another and but it doesn't seem to be going that way currently.
Well, I guess I would just offer this as the preacher in the room, just that it did for some people. It did for some people, not for everyone.
Oh, no, yeah. Yeah, I hear that. I think that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Lutricia, you've been extremely generous with your time and your life and your heart. And I just want to say on behalf of our community, thank you for this time and all the time and love that you give our community. Thank you so much for being with us today.
You know how much I love this community and the people in it, and you've been incredibly generous and kind to me. So to me, I'm talking to family. That's how I feel when I come here and see you and see this congregation. I'm at home. So I just feel like this is a family conversation.
Wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Are you still around this weekend, or are you headed back, or what are you doing?
Yeah, I'll be here until the 10th of November. So I've still got some visiting to do. I hope I can catch up with Nancy and Allison, and Carol and I've been out to dinner. So I spent lunch at the Botanical Garden with Jill and Carolyn. And so, yeah, I'm around for a while.
Try to tune in Sunday if you can. A friend of the congregation, Tim, has been playing guitar in a church in Compton for the last year and a half. And when he tells stories about family, he's been adopted by a family there as one of their sons. And I'm going to ask him to talk a little about that and play some. So you might get a kick.
Yeah, I plan to. All right.
All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Thanks, everybody.